My love affair with the human voice, the sweet place where words meet soul. When I was 23 years old, I fell in love with being on the radio. As a volunteer at my local public radio station in Santa Cruz, California, I started my own women's rhythm and blues show, and each week I read aloud chapters of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. I interviewed people and made radio documentaries, splicing tape the old-fashioned way with a razor blade. I was a young dyke with a message and a voice I wasn't afraid to use. At 25, I crammed into a Volkswagen van with a bunch of folks from the radio station, and we barreled across the country to Colorado for a big public radio conference. Radio stations in Alaska were recruiting, and I decided to apply for a job. The job announcement said a year of experience as a radio news reporter was required. Well, I'd never been a radio news reporter before, so I faked my audition tape. I created a phony news story, recorded it on a cassette, slipped it into a tight, padded envelope, and mailed it to Alaska. A week later, I got a call. KRBD-FM wanted to fly me up for an interview. I couldn't believe it. A week later, I was at the Blueberry Festival in Ketchikan. It was summertime in Alaska, light till after midnight. They took me out bottom fishing for halibut at 11 p.m. Salmon swam upstream, spawning and dying in the creek that led up to the door of the newsroom. At the end of my week-long visit, they offered me the job. $16,000 a year. I was going to be rich. A year later, I parlayed that job into my own daily talk show, the Brown Bag Cafe. Every day from noon to 1, I interviewed whomever I wanted. The mayor, the head of one of the 3 local native tribes, a cannery worker, a pregnant teenager, a new widow and her 5 children as part of a series on grief. And my very favorite interview, the lunch hour I discussed the business of death with our town mortician, who just so happened to run a jazz show on our station. It was a small town. Everyone listened to my show. Back then, rural Alaska was a place where radio mattered. Our public radio station, the lone commercial TV station, and the sole newspaper in town were the only 3 sources of information. People relied on us for news, events, tides, and weather, especially weather. It rained 13 feet a year in Ketchikan. People's lives and livelihoods depended on the weather. The very first things I bought in Ketchikan were rain pants, serious rain boots, and a hardcore rain jacket. 13 feet of rain a year is nothing to sneeze at. In Ketchikan, there was drizzly rain, pounding rain, misty rain, horizontal rain, thunderstorms, and pelting rain. Umbrellas were useless. Only tourists carried them. I quickly learned to do everything in the rain. I'll never forget the night my softball team played in the rain on a muddy field at midnight in early July. Sunshine was so rare, they'd close school when it happened. All this happened long before the internet, before satellite TV. Everything was tape delayed. We watched the Christmas shows on New Year's Day. Living in Ketchikan meant being disconnected from the outside world. I found that, and the fact that there was only 12 miles of road in one direction and 16 miles of road in the other, depressing. But my daily talk show remains to this day the best job I ever had. I got to ride on float planes and helicopters. I ate bear teriyaki at a party. I watched my friend shoot a 100-pound halibut in the head, and we ate the flesh all summer. We saw bald eagles every day. And then there was winter. Dark when I left for work and dark when I walked home. The only other queers in town were 11 deeply closeted lesbians who grimaced every time I said the word lesbian, so I stopped saying it. And I'd come from Santa Cruz, a place where I'd read erotic poetry at the Women's Coffee House, wearing a skin-tight blue danskin, skin-tight blue jeans, black ankle boots, and a purple velvet hat with a peacock feather tucked rakishly into the brim. After 2 years on that rainy island, I just couldn't take it anymore. When I gave notice to the station manager and told him I was moving back to California, I cried. I loved radio, but I wasn't willing to move from small market to mid-size market to larger market, hopping around the country for the next 15 years, the established path for building a media career. My time in radio was over, and I knew it. I was 27 years old. That was the same year I had my first memories of my grandfather sexually abusing me as a child. And a year after that, Ellen Bass and I started writing The Courage to Heal, while I worked 3 part-time jobs to pay the rent. When it came out 3 years later, The Courage to Heal changed my life and the life of millions of other women. My career as an author had begun. But I never lost my love for the human voice and all that it communicates. My favorite thing about writing The Courage to Heal was interviewing all the women. I did interviews for almost all my books. I've never stopped loving the complexity and drama of being human, and I had a real talent for getting people to tell me their stories. People told me things they'd never told anyone before. And as an author, I've always loved being interviewed. I have my own audiobooks. For decades, I've said, someday, when I get old and my life slows down, I'll get back on the radio. Well, 41 years have passed since I left Ketchikan, and my life has definitely not slowed down. But thanks to Substack and the incredible help of Tammy Schmidt at Substack Tech for Beginners, I've just launched the Writer's Journey podcast. Tammy did her magic, and suddenly all the audio I've recorded since I joined Substack is showing up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. My friend and student Kathy Krisick created this beautiful logo from a photo of me leaning on the 0-kilometer marker at the very end of the Camino de Santiago in Spain, after leading last year's Creative Camino adventure. I think a bit of the attitude that showed up in that old book jacket photo still lives inside me. Don't you think? So now I have a podcast, a dream fulfilled. I can't begin to tell you how thrilled I am. How to find the Writer's Journey with Laura Davis podcast. If you're already a free or paid subscriber, you'll always have my audio at the top of my posts. But if you'd prefer to access my audio feed through your favorite podcast app, you could subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Details in the show notes. See you next week.